What's happening, fishing friends? Today we're doing some Baitcaster maintenance, and I know for a lot of folks that can be scary, but I'm going to try to make it as easy as possible. At the end of this video, I'm also going to leave a link to me completely taking apart, cleaning. It's actually the Lube LFS, but most of these are pretty similar inside, taking it all the way apart and cleaning it in case you have any questions on that. But today we've got two issues. Number one, I've got Daiwa Tatula 150 from my buddy Brando. Y'all see him on the show quite a bit. Great guy. But he had troubles with the line guide on this. I've since fixed it, so this is an intro afterwards. But he was turning the handle and his line guide was not going back and forth. And the problem with this one was something quite different than I'd ever seen. But I'm going to give you some tips on fixing that. This one, this is a reel, Fitzgerald reel that a subscriber sent me. And when you would pop the handle backwards, it was reeling backwards. And that could be a couple things. It could be if you put braid on your Baitcaster without backing, braid will slip on it, so line will come out. Other times you'll be kind of like popping your rod and it will let line out, or it might just fluff up and backlash a bit because the spool lets go. That could be a dirty anti-reverse bearing that you just kind of need to get in and clean. This one was kind of a little bit different deal, a little bit too much grease on it, but I'll show you that too. And I'll leave timestamps down below in case you just want to see this one second. First up, we're going to get working on the Tatula 150. So enough yapping, let's do some stuff. Okay, so on this first Daiwa Tatula, you can see this is the worm gear, completely broke. There was pieces of it all inside here, and the culprit was this little screw. I didn't find it until a couple days later after taking it apart. It was stuck behind this spring, but what happened is that little screw must have been loose and it was going all around inside here. You can see some of the teeth of this gear that connects to that worm gear. So when you turn your handle, this big gear turns and then turns the worm gear, which is not there. It goes up above it, but see how some of these teeth are already rounded off and broke? There was quite a bit of damage in here. Completely broke the worm gear, so I had to get two of these. I just called Daiwa's customer service. They sent them out, the worm gear and then the other new gear, that one that I was pointing to. See how the teeth are nice and pointy? That's what you want. So the first thing is we have to take out this little, I believe they call them an E-clip or a C-clip. Take this off, and that's your actual worm, is what it connects to, the thing in front of your Baitcaster that the line guide runs back and forth on. Have to use a couple screwdrivers to do this. I hold one in place and use the other end to kind of push it out. It's hard to do on camera, so I had to jump off and do that. And then I put that new worm gear on. All you do is slip it right over the little edge of that. You can see there when you turn your main gear, you know, the main handle there, it turns that little worm gear. So we'll just need to put that little retention clip back on, and that's all there is to changing that gear out. But as I said, we also have to change that big one. There's that little piece. Don't lose it. They are tiny. Oh, sorry about that hair. Anyway, don't lose it. They are tiny. That's what it looks like. I'm sure there's a special tool to get them out, but I always just use two screwdrivers. Now, to get this, the main gear out, this gear is actually connected to it down at the bottom of it. So I'm going to take out the two screws here. They just connect directly to the frame of the Baitcaster there. That whole piece kind of pulls out. You can see there's a bearing on the bottom of it. Drop those two screws out of there. Don't lose those again. We have another little C-clip here that we have to take off. That's what holds the bearing on, that little silver plate, and it's on the back of that white gear there that we need to replace. So I pushed it off just a little bit. I'm using my pliers here. Be really careful because it can shoot out like that. Don't lose it. Small piece, not good. Hey, I found it, thank goodness. That's what holds all that in there. So to take this apart, each piece just comes off. It's super easy to do. Pull that off, the little retention plate. That's what your screws go through. And I will point something out about this later. When you put the screws on, there is a right and wrong way to put this little metal retention piece back on. And then this piece of the gear just pulls right off. So super easy to do. Not a lot of work to that. I'm going to put some grease on. This is some of the new Daiwa, I think they call it the Space Age grease or something like that. Here's the deal. See, it won't thicken when it's cold or too hot. People say it's supposed to be one of the best greases out there, and I've just never picked any up. So finally got some. We'll see how this does. I put just a little bit on and then rub it around with my fingers because less is more usually when it comes to grease. I'm just doing this to kind of lubricate it. You don't want globs of this. More is not better. So I put the little plastic gear on there. Again, nothing to it. Put my plate on and make sure the recessed parts of the plate, I'll show you this, are pointing up because your screws sit in there. Did put just a tiny bit of grease on the bottom there because that does rub on that, contacts it. So I want to make sure there's a little bit of grease. Again, not too much or it just cakes stuff up. Put my bearing on, and then again put that little tiny C-clip on. I'm gonna do this off camera because it's tough. There we go. Everything's all put together. Now you can see there those two holes, that metal bracket. Make sure that recessed part is pointing up, because when you put your screws in there, the screws have a flat top and need to sit directly flat on that. Otherwise that plastic gear won't turn back and forth. If the screw heads are sticking up, it'll hit those. There you can see as that goes in, those screws are tapered, so they need to go down in that little recessed part of that metal thing, that metal holder deal. Otherwise, if you flip it around the wrong way, those will not sit down and it'll catch that. So put that back in, super easy to do, kind of give it a little turn around, everything works. And my lag guide goes back and forth. Put some grease on this. Now this is not a load bearing gear, so this is not a metal gear that's, you know, running hard. This is just turning the line guide there. It's not like your actual main gear, the brass main gear that is turning and pulling the line in as you've got a bait on or a fish on. This one doesn't have really much of any load to it. As some of that grease gets pushed out, I just put it on the other side of the gear that doesn't have any grease on it, kind of spread that around. And then again, don't forget to put your little E-clip on here. That keeps that worm gear stuck in place. Put your springs on. Those are super easy to lose. Make sure you do not lose those. I've done that before. And also make sure when you put that side plate on that you put it straight down so you don't bend those springs. Putting this main gear assembly on just to show you something. There's also a little recessed part in this ratchet looking gear, that part that I'm pointing to, that needs to sit flat against that plastic gear below it. This is a mistake people make. They don't get it down in there and then they try to shove that side plate on, it won't fit. Also, I noticed when I took this apart, this ratchet gear, this is what your thumb bar presses onto and moves stuff, had gouges in it from that screw. You can see the edge of that screw dug into this, you know, when he was reeling. So it's crazy the amount of damage just a little screw floating around in there can do. Again, just to make sure I've got this lubed up, I'm going to just kind of wipe this around with my fingers. I don't want a ton on there. Just want a little bit, since that is going to be a moving piece of this. Put that on. I put the spacer on. Oh yeah, I forgot to show you this. Make sure that sits down in there. That's what it looks like, nice and flat. You can see where that moves in there. Sits nice and flat. If you don't have it right, you can see there where it doesn't fit, and it's going to have that space between that plastic gear and then this one. When you get it in there, it fits where it's supposed to, and there's not any space under it. Again, put some grease on here, just barely a little bit. Push it around in there. You've got your spacer and then your main gear with the drag components on it. You don't want to get, you know, grease and stuff all over there. That's why kind of less is more. You just want enough grease on the outside of this and any sort of moving parts to just lubricate it. So there's the main gear and the pinion. That's where we're going to grease up. And I usually do like half of the main gear and then start to spread it around. Again, some of that's going to kind of come off. I'll wipe that with my fingers and put it back on the other side of the gear, run it around. This is the side plate I was talking about. Make sure when you put this on that it goes straight down. Okay. There's also in the little sheath part here that sits inside your anti-reverse bearing. See how that has two little like nodules? Those two little posts have to sit down. That's too much grease. You can see all that extra grease. It just flings around. But anyway, when you put this on, make sure those two little pieces fit in the top part of that drag assembly up there. You can see the bearing won't go all the way down because it's not in there. So I just kind of hold that and then turn my main shaft there, and it drops into place. That's what you need to make sure. Again, another reason why your baitcaster might not be working. It's these little tiny things that can really mess it up. So make sure that's in there. Then I can put everything back together. Screws, pretty simple, but show you some of that. The clicker assembly, that's all your clicker assembly is to your drag. When you tighten your star drag and it clicks, that little metal piece on the outside. Put all that on. Make sure you don't reverse those little drag washers there, because then your drag won't work. Put your retention nut on there. Remember, it's a left-handed reel, so lefty tighty, righty loosey. Put my non-handle side plate on. Put the star drag on. Tighten that baby up. Give it a test. Oh yeah, smooth as butter now. That line guide works. Just double checking to make sure everything works there. Thumb bar works. Clicks, drag works. Everything looks good now. Again, nice and smooth. Not too hard to do. Okay, the problem we're tackling now is a Baitcaster. The user said that sometimes when they would pop their rod, like if they were bouncing a jig or a Texas rig, line would let out. And I thought, since he sent it to me, it didn't have braid on it, it's probably going to be an anti-reverse problem. So what I'm doing here, you can see when I'm kind of pop the handle backwards, see, look at that, how it goes backwards that much. Usually that's always going to be a problem with your anti-reverse bearing. Now you might have to fully replace it. That is really easy to do. The bearing just pushes right out, and you can see this one was even kind of loose anyway. It was kind of lubed. It's that yellow piece with the silver, you know, ring and stuff around it, the sheath. I couldn't believe when I pushed that. Usually they're kind of hard pressed in there, and my secret is just to use a socket. I use a socket that's about the size of that and push it out. There might be a fancy tool to do it, but a socket that size has worked for me. This one came out super easy, but I noticed when I started touching it, it had some sort of super sticky, oily, greasy substance. I don't know. You can see inside there, it's interesting how these work. It's not a roller bearing, or excuse me, it's not a ball bearing like we're used to seeing, you know, that you pull out, it's all encased in one, it spins. This is a roller bearing. So the way these work, it's got 6 different little steel kind of cylinders, or the rollers. They fit into this plastic piece, and when you take one of these, I couldn't believe how sticky they were, this stuff. But when you take one of these out, it's just this little barrel cylinder looking thing, and they run around the inside of that. That sheath that you put in there runs around the inside of that, and it only lets it turn one way. Those little like seagull looking wings there, the bird wing looking things, when the roller gets pushed back against those, they push into the side, the yellow piece, I guess the back of it or bottom of it, it's kind of hard to show you, but they push into that and wedge into there, and they stop that piece from going backwards. So it only allows it to go one way forward, not backwards. That's how they work. So I cleaned all these off, cleaned the sheath, cleaned that roller bearing, just use some alcohol, some Q-tips. Be careful not to get any sort of like fray, hairy stuff in there. You got to be really careful. I also used like a towel I have for my airbrushing stuff, like a tea towel or a mechanic's towel, anything that doesn't have all that fibrous stuff. To put these in, all you do is lay it on the spot where it goes and just push it in there real gently. It clicks right in just like that. And the grease that I'm just using that Shimano drag grease. I just put a little bit on there and rub it around in my fingers. You don't want a ton. The big problems with these is you get too much grease or dirt or extra oil, extra stuff in there, and this will not work. Meaning it will allow the sheath that I just put in there, it'll allow that to roll backwards. So you can see it goes forward. I trust it back, or I try it backwards, and it's not going backwards. So this one just had too much grease, too much sticky stuff. It wasn't letting those rollers move back and forth in there to kind of wedge and stop that from moving. When you put this in, remember it does only go one way, so you can put this in flipped around the wrong way. I always make sure, okay, this is a left-handed reel, turning it that way, and make sure it goes forward the way I want. And there was even, look at that, inside there was more of the sticky, gross stuff. I don't know what they used, but look at that, how sticky that is. I mean, I like sticky grease for like a main gear and stuff, but this stuff was crazy. So anyway, this just pushes right back in here. Like I said, this one's easier than some that I've used. This does have a bearing that goes there as part of the spacer inside that side plate there. You can see just to show you, put that in there, and that's how it all fits. Some of these have those, some don't, just kind of depends on the brand. But put that in there, and then putting all this back together, and this is a graphite side plate. So one thing to note is these screws will have larger threads on them. I just kind of showed you there up close. So when you put these in, you can tighten these way too much. So I get it to where it just gets tight and then stops like that. And then I go just maybe like 1/8 of a turn, a little bit more. And that's all the more I go. You don't need to wrench down on this. You can crack that spot where it fits in again, just to show you get to where it's tight, and then just a little bit of a turn past that. That's it, like a little eighth of a turn, or 7th or 6th, I don't know. Anyway, after I got this all cleaned up with new grease on it, this one's good as new. If you needed to replace that anti-reverse bearing, all you do is push it out, get your new one, and put it in. They're super easy to replace. Sometimes they just need a cleaning, a little bit of alcohol, rub it around in there with a Q-tip, make sure there's not a bunch of fibers or dirt in there. If those barrels, those little cylinders can't move, that's what stops it. So that one's good as new. Fixed it all up, just need a little TLC. So if you ever have that problem, hopefully this helps. All right, fishing friends, I hope that was helpful for you. Comment below and let me know if you've ever had a problem with your Baitcaster that you've tried to fix. I did a video a while back on my Tatula 200 where I had to fix the whole main shaft. Done some other repair videos, but if there's something that a lot of you see or a common problem you want me to open up and fix one or show you, comment below, because I don't see a ton of this type of stuff on the old YouTubes these days anymore. And I want to get back into doing, you know, taking these apart, showing reviews, doing more of this gear stuff, because I feel like there's a lack of that. And the gear stuff, reviews, takedowns, teardown talk is some of my favorite stuff. So Comment below and let me know. No subscribe fishing friends today because it's going to be these two gentlemen. Whoa. Brando, and I think this was Jason that sent this one. Both you guys, thanks for letting me work on your stuff, get it fixed. No, people don't be sending me stuff in. I owed both of these guys. So thanks to them, and thanks again to everybody else who keeps watching, supporting me. It means the world to me. I got at it. Thanks for watching. Till next time.